Welcome to another episode of Fantasy News. No sponsor for this video. I know you guys have been a bit peeved by sponsors in the past, but I am going to self-plug real quick. I put up a video yesterday called The Wheel of Time Through Vines, and apparently a lot of people didn't get delivered it. So if you haven't seen that, it wasn't in your sub box. Link to it right down there, and a card popping up by my head. Although it did get demonetized, so it doesn't really help me if you watch it, but apparently people think it's funny. It's only spoilers to like book 7. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the hard-hitting fantasy news of the day, starting with news from Nicholas Ames, the author of the Kings of the Wild and the Band series. The question was posed on the Fantasy News subreddit: Nicholas Ames' Outlaw Empire, parentheses, the band number 3, close parentheses, info, question mark, and Nicholas Ames himself, the legend, the myth, I said those out of order, replied, "Hey, that title really slipped the leash, huh?" It did indeed. As for info, I can tell you that it's inspired by 90s music, in the way that Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose were inspired by 70s and 80s music respectively, which is to say, anti-establishment hip-hop, grunge, and a whole lotta Rage Against the Machine vibes. I'm digging hearing that, but does that mean if there's going to be a book 4, is it going to be a lot of pop music? Because that'll be neat. Unfortunately, to say I've had a tough time getting things rolling would be a gross understatement. I've had a lot of false starts this past year, and only recently settled on a beginning I think will put me back on track. So unfortunately, it won't be out for a while yet. Rest assured though, no one wants this book to arrive more than me. I love hearing that, Nicholas. Don't rush yourself. Take your time. Master your craft. Smart people know that you don't want to rush an author. You want them to perfect their book when they put it out. That's why I get accused of being called a Martin apologist. But hey, I think you should master your craft and perfect your art before you put it out. That's just my opinion. I appreciate what you do, and I will continue to hype these books because damn, they're good. If you haven't seen my review of Kings of the Wild, card by my head again, boom, check it out. I think it's worth it. There's an Amazon purchase link on there as well if you want to support me and what I do here, blah, 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 blah. Continuing what Nicholas said. I wish my answer was it's right around the corner, but I'm grateful for your interest regardless, and to everyone on this subreddit who keeps fanning those hype embers while I get my head on straight. Although we'll be dealing with a whole new generation of characters, I want to give the old favorites the send-off they deserve. Fantastic update, Nicholas. I appreciate you taking the time to respond to your fans, because a lot of authors don't take the time to do that, and it gives me a bit to talk about on fantasy news, and it's legitimate hardcore fantasy news, which are my favorite kind of fantasy news. Can I say the word fantasy news again? I just did. Next story. Solaris, the publisher, has scooped the next fantasy novel from author Yoon-Ha Lee. I hope I'm saying that right, and I'm probably not. This author is most known for his 2016 work, Nine Fox Gambit. Haven't read that one, but apparently it was very well received by critics and audiences alike. But this novel particularly did catch my focus because apparently it is inspired by the real-life Japanese occupation of Korea, and I love fantasy that is inspired by real-world events. And using the fantasy genre to tell these stories or explain these real-world events or the lessons to be learned from them in a fantastical way is just something I adore and almost always inspires me to look into the real world events even more. So I'm hyped for this one. I'm definitely going to be putting it on my pre-order list, and if you want to see all the descriptions and everything, of course, link to this article right down there in the description down below, as well as everything I'm going to talk about here. But the key piece of news you probably need to know is that it'll be released in the UK June 11th of this year, 2020. If you're watching this next year, it's already out, so you can go check it out right now. And speaking of upcoming fantasy sci-fi works, we had a list put out by Polygon that I actually kind of went in thinking, oh, they're just going to say like, here are the sci-fi fantasy books you should check out this year, and they're all going to be the popular picks. But there were some really interesting ones that weren't on my radar yet. So if your TBR for this year is not already big enough, Polygon has a list to help you expand that Amazon wish list or library hold list, whatever you do, to a greater extent. But let's be honest, even if your list is massive, you're still going to go check it out and add more because you have the same addiction I do, a book addiction. We're all a bunch of dirty, dirty readers here. Now, transitioning out of the hardcore fantasy news, I want to talk about something that's kind of more loosely tied to the genre, but is definitely still important for a couple of key reasons. And that is that Amazon has reported that it has passed 150 million users signed up for its Amazon Prime service, which means they have the ability to watch Amazon Prime shows. That's a huge number. Now, granted, a lot of them probably just signed up to use Amazon Prime in general and aren't necessarily watching the shows. But this is still a big enough number that for upcoming fantasy and sci-fi shows, most notably Wheel of Time and Lord of the Rings, have quite the base open and available to make them a smash success, as well as their existing shows like Carnival Row have the ability to be watched by a tremendous audience and make these budgets that Amazon has been throwing into these shows suddenly make a lot more sense, especially if a lot of these people just signed up for the Prime service and need to be convinced to start watching shows. Having these headline-grabbing shows like most expensive ever show being Lord of the Rings, now available on Prime, can make a lot of these people start turning on those shows, and a lot of people just signing up for Prime as a result. So they kind of have the double win there. I've covered this in the channel before, where individuals signing up for Amazon are so much more valuable than just one individual signing up for Netflix, because suddenly that person's probably going to start shopping on Amazon more as well. Now, before I get into the Wheel of Time leaks, I want to quickly cover what I'm calling the Disney kerfuffle segment of fantasy news. I try not to cover Disney too much here, but this was worth note. One, we had some release dates announced for Disney Plus coming down the road that I think are pretty exciting. We have Falcon and the Winter Soldier, apparently going to be released in August, The Mandalorian Season 2 in October, and WandaVision, which I accidentally called WakandaVision once, which I still want to see that show, will be released in December. As well, apparently as of February 3rd, 28.6 million people are paid subscribers to Disney Plus. It's not a bad number for a streaming service that just launched. But, Disney has two other announcements, both of which I do not like. Kathleen Kennedy has confirmed that Indiana Jones 5 will not be a reboot. Not only do I not want an Indiana Jones 5, if they were going to do it, I would want it to be a reboot. No offense, Harrison Ford. He just doesn't give as much effort, it appears, anymore, and I just don't see him being I'd like to see a new Indiana Jones who covers the modern topics and politics of the things that Indiana Jones does, because there's a lot of controversy around the whole lines of like it belongs in a museum and not with the people who created it. And a new generation of Indiana Jones which tackles these ideas and gives both sides of the protection versus the returning would be neat, with a new young actor who can bring the energy that I just don't think Harrison Ford can anymore. The guy likes his checks, clearly, but I don't know. I just don't see this storyline with nuclear bomb fridge Indiana Jones and Shia LaBeouf's son continuing on to great success. I could be wrong. I'm not the biggest Indiana Jones fan to begin with, so let me know, you as an Indiana Jones fan, do you want them to reboot it? Do you just not want another Indiana Jones? Or are you really excited to see Harrison Ford reprise the role for another time? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm always open to other opinions outside myself. I'm not default right by any means. But then there was the next story from Disney that just... why? Disney has announced they're doing a straight-to Disney Plus retelling live action of Lilo and Stitch. Let me just get this out there. Lilo and Stitch works animated, and in my opinion, will not work in live action, period. But the other side of this, the additional just why aspect of it, is just why straight to Disney Plus? Do you have that little faith in it? Is this your new version of straight to VHS sequels? Your live actions are doing that poorly, where you're just like, screw it, we'll just throw them straight to Disney Plus? Or is it, no, this is good and it'll bring us more subscribers? Regardless, I actually don't care that much about that side of it, because Lilo and Stitch will not work in live action. I love Lilo and Stitch. It's one of my favorite kids movies of all time. But this whole live action obsession we're seeing with Disney, where they just recreate their old stories and throw them in this live action attempted animated style, drives me nuts, because Stitch works because we, through the animation, can believe he's ugly while he's so cute because we're seeing an animated version. But trying to do this live action lookalike CGI monstrosity will have a disconnect where either he has to be ugly and people see him as ugly, or he has to be cute and we'll see him as cute, and then it's weird where people react as if he's an ugly monster. Just on premise, that doesn't work. You can try to do the so ugly he's cute thing, but I don't know if that'll work. For me, I just don't like this. Stop it. I love Lilo and Stitch. It's one of the best you've done. Just leave it alone, please. Well, they're gonna do it. I mean, it's happening, so I'll just be sad. Okay, all that being said, we need to get into the Wheel of Time. set photo leak that happened here. It's Amazon's property. I don't know if I can display the image, so I am not going to. In fact, I've seen it removed from Twitter accounts and things that were displaying it, and I don't want this video to be demonetized. My Vine video already was, and I can't keep affording that, so I'm not going to. But we had a photo leaked that I'm sure if you look online hard enough you can find, where Matt and Rand were out together, and it looked interesting. I've seen fans speculating miles with it, just jumping to huge conclusions about the entire structure of story 1, when in reality I think you might be able to take a couple steps with this one. I mean, for all we know, this is a dream sequence. We have no idea what this shot really entails. I don't remember seeing an exact scene like this in the books, but it could be taking place during the traveling of Matt and Rand. I'm not going to get into spoilers here, so I'm going to leave it at that. But yes, a set image was leaked. It certainly looked interesting. Good luck finding a even remotely high-res version of it. I'm not going to display it here because I don't want my video demonetized, but all right, let me know what you think of that shot leak in the comments down below, because it certainly has people speculating like wild. All right, deep breath now, as we're going to talk about another complex story here. So Apple's upcoming Foundation adaptation, yes, Apple has a streaming service of their own, if you don't remember, is apparently going to be the largest production ever for Ireland. An impressive feat. Now, when it comes to adaptations, I'm actually not going to focus on the fact this is such a large production here. What I want to focus on is adapting the Foundation as a whole. And when it comes to adaptations, people with sci-fi and fantasy say often there's series that are too big to adapt. I mean, I've heard it a billion times about Wheel of Time since the series was announced over at Amazon. But for me, it's not about page count, and that's what people seem to obsess over. It's about story. And if you want maybe too difficult to adapt, I can think of few stories that, for me as a writer, if I tried to tackle, would be harder to communicate through a visual medium than Isaac Asimov's The Foundation. I am not saying it's impossible, especially if it's going to be this gigantic production where they're taking all kinds of risks. I'm just saying they either need to fundamentally change the source material and make it something that tries to capture the spirit, or take some real risks in terms of story narrative for a traditional TV show. It's going to be one or the other, because this is not your typical sci-fi tale. It is truly epic. I don't want to spoil one of the most iconic sci-fi stories ever told. If you haven't read it, do it. But this is definitely an adaptation I'm going to be keeping my eyes on. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying this is one of the most challenging I've seen, maybe up there next to the fact that Amazon's trying to adapt the second age of Lord of the Rings, which again is going to be a tricky adaptation to pull off due to the source material itself. We also have a new Star Trek show apparently beginning production as soon as Star Trek Discovery Season 3 wraps. It's speculated to have the title Section 31, and I want to state my piece on Star Trek here. I personally have not enjoyed the new Star Trek that we have been given these last few years. It just doesn't feel like Star Trek to me. It's not something I'm buying into. I've said that before, and people seem to run with it, saying that I'm trying to gatekeep and push out fans of the new stuff. Not at all. For me, it doesn't feel like Star Trek, but if you are enjoying it, I will never dissuade people from enjoying content, especially science fiction and fantasy like this. If you're loving it, welcome aboard the Star Trek fan base. I'm happy to have you here. I don't personally enjoy it that much. I recommend you go and check out like Next Generation or original Star Trek if you haven't, or maybe even like Voyager and Enterprise, experiment a bit. And if you're just a fan of the new stuff, give it a try. But I am by no means trying to say these people aren't real Star Trek fans. I think you totally are. I look forward to seeing you at conventions, and I will never take part in that gatekeeping narrative. I love Star Trek, I just don't happen to love these new shows we're getting now. Simple as that. But that is the last bit of fantasy news we're going to cover here today. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here, and have a good one, y'all. Peace. And of course, I'd like to record a special shout out to my latest high-tier Patreon, Cameron Reagan. I knew a Cameron growing up. We were best friends for a long time. I miss the dude. But you have a great name. I like your name. CR. Kerr. You can't really have your initials be your name. But great name regardless.